And joining us now with more on the Iranian threat and the ongoing nuclear talks between Washington and Tehran is our very own ILTV News anchor and executive board member at the Institute for Voices of Liberty, Emily Schrader, and Behnam Ben Taleblu, research fellow specializing in Iran for the Foundation of Defense of Democracies. Thank you both for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
Pleasure.
So, Emily, let's start with you. You know, President Trump held a phone call with Prime Minister Netanyahu in the Islamic Republic of Iran was at the top of the agenda. How aligned are the U.S. and Israeli governments on this issue? And is there a concern that the U.S. could spring a surprise deal on Israel?
Well, I think that's always been a concern. As soon as it was announced that Trump was going to be holding talks with the Islamic Republic of Iran, the agendas aren't completely aligned. We've repeatedly seen Trump sort of waffle back and forth, at least initially, before confirming ultimately that under no circumstances would there be enrichment allowed, both through Witkoff himself, who stated that, and also multiple Trump officials from Secretary of State Rubio to the president himself. Since then, we've seen a very strong message of that, one that was reiterated in the story that you just ran. That being said, Trump is also very, very adamant about trying to make a deal. And it's very important at this point that a deal isn't made that is reminiscent of the JCPOA, which, of course, Trump withdrew from during his first term. And that is actually what the Islamic Republic is trying to get through right now, a 3.67 enrichment in their nuclear proliferation. That's something, of course, that the U.S. and Israel should absolutely not allow.
Mm-hmm. And Behnam, turning to you, you know, the negotiations have been dragging on for quite some time now. And yesterday, following the call, President Trump called the Iranians great negotiators, almost sounded like praise. You know, the president has repeatedly stated that he prefers a diplomatic deal, as Emily just mentioned, but a military option remains on the table. But the Iranians seem to be holding their ground despite the threats, despite Trump's comments. You know, the regime is the weakest it's ever been. So how could they afford to reject this U.S. proposal? I mean, do the Ayatollahs believe Trump is simply bluffing?
Well, it's important to connect a few dots here. Weak doesn't mean not lethal. Weak doesn't mean not dangerous. The Islamic Republic of Iran is still home to the largest ballistic missile arsenal in the Middle East, the largest drone arsenal in the Middle East. It's the only country producing this level of highly enriched uranium without having first produced nuclear weapons. It's the only country in the world to first produce a 2,000-kilometer ballistic missile at home without first producing nuclear weapons. So there's everything and a whole host of reasons that makes the Islamic Republic exceptionally dangerous despite its weak social, economic, political, regional, environmental, what have you, position. Now, what they are counting on, actually, is President Trump's rhetoric and the overall post-Bush administration U.S. desire to do less in the Middle East, not more, as basically functioning as a human shield between them and a potential preemptive Israeli military attack. Make no mistake, Iran is engaging now, but they're not engaging in good faith. They're engaging to buy time. They're engaging to basically have snapback expire, which could happen by October of this year. They're engaging to put distance between America and its most important ally in the Middle East, which is Israel. And they're engaging ultimately to downplay the increasingly hawkish position we've seen from the Europeans over the past few years because of warming Iran-Russia ties. So they're doing all of these things to buy time, put distance, and to isolate America. So this is very much a return to the normal divide and conquer diplomatic strategy we've seen from the Islamic Republic when its back has been against the wall.
And Emily, I want to hear your thoughts on this as well. I mean, how can the Iranian regime really afford to stand up to the United States of America, the great United States of America? I mean, what game are they playing at? And given the current climate in the Trump administration, as Behnam mentioned, the America First vision, how likely is it that the U.S. would actually strike Iran?
Well, I mean, I think that remains to be seen. We're going to have to see how it plays out with the nuclear talks and what the response is from the Islamic Republic if they actually are able to make some kind of a deal, whether or not it's to Israel's liking. But I actually agree in full with what Behnam said about the situation with the Islamic Republic. It's very clear that what they're doing when it comes to these negotiations is buying time. Their interest is trying to strengthen their position within the region in order to achieve sanction relief, and in order to continue continue their, frankly, genocidal agenda for the state of Israel, ultimately the United States as well, and of course destabilization efforts throughout the region that we see them backing the Houthis. We've already seen them investing in potential future proxy terror groups in Sudan. There's been a lot of activity on that front, and I think the absolute worst step that could happen is going soft on the Islamic Republic right now. What really needs to happen and what really is going to bring about an actual change in the region ultimately is only going to come with regime change. Now, hopefully that isn't something that has to happen through a war. This is something the majority of the Iranian people really, really want to achieve, regardless of the nuclear issue. But we're not going to see a significant change in the region and in the activities of the Islamic Republic through a deal, even if a nuclear deal is made.
Mm-hmm. And Behnam, what kind of a time frame are we looking at? I mean, how long can these negotiations continue to drag out? The U.S. has already given a proposal. Iran is expected to give its counter proposal. I mean, how much longer are we looking at?
Well, if you ask me, it's already gone on too long. I think there's certainly ample predicate for the president to push away from the table here. But make no mistake, I think that's what the Iranians are trying to force the U.S. to do. The Iranians have this narrative, despite the Islamic Republic of Iran being the least good faith or the most bad faith actor here, they're trying to say Trump left the deal in 2018. They're trying to do things to wear out Trump's patience, potentially have him leave the table again, maybe have this be the casus belli for them to go for the potential atomic weapon. We don't know. But one thing is clear, is that this largely needs to be a political issue, not a technical issue. The reason the Iranians are able to drag it on so long is because they're not meeting the one political red line set by the Trump administration, which is no enrichment and full dismantlement. What the Iranians are trying to do is find multiple technical ways to water down that political position. And if the president or the Trump administration or even the West really gives Tehran the time, these kind of talks can go on for years because Tehran will continue to try to find a way to square peg and round hole Washington into agreeing something that is not conform with its own political red lines. And let me just say here, yes, the Iranians have said for many, many years that they would never stop enriching and that they've never dismantled, but the supplicant does not get to dictate red lines to the superpower here. So even looking at this issue of the timeline and the red lines from an America First agenda, caving into Tehran's demands and playing to their timeline simply makes zero sense.
Mm-hmm. And Emily, if the Trump administration does eventually reach a deal, maybe it does secure an end to uranium enrichment. I mean, does this truly minimize the Iranian threat? I mean, what about, as you mentioned, its funding of terrorism, its drone and ballistic missile productions, and so on?
Well, I think this is the problem and why there are many Iranian dissidents who have been quite critical of the fact there are negotiations in the first place. Obviously, as an Israeli, first and foremost, Israel's interest is in ensuring that there is no nuclear weapon, also from the perspective of the United States. But that doesn't actually solve the problem because the IRGC activities, the ballistic missiles, as Behnam mentioned, all of these activities that the regime has been doing for decades since the Islamic Revolution in '79 is something that isn't being addressed at all by a nuclear deal. At least that's not what's on the table right now. And if we're actually going to curb the terrorist activities of the Islamic regime throughout the region, not just Israel, but throughout the region, then that also has to be addressed. Now, is that something that would be addressed in a nuclear deal? Probably not, as it seems so far, but it's definitely something that needs to be dealt with at some point sooner or later.
Mm-hmm. And Behnam, I want to ask one final question. Why is the Trump administration so hesitant towards striking Iran and towards regime change in Iran?
Well, as you know, where I work and live and sit in Washington, D.C., the RC word is perhaps the ultimate no-no word. It's the ultimate nasty word, and that's largely the hangover of the Bush administration. Whether you look at the Obama administration, the Trump administration, or the Biden administration, every U.S. candidate for a higher office, particularly with a focus on foreign policy, has been able to get more votes by promising to do less in the Middle East, not more. Again, that is largely because of the botched experience and the hangover of 2003 Iraq. Obviously, as Emily and you and your viewers know, standing with the Iranian people, both in principle and in practice, need not at all look like the disaster that was Iraq pre or post 2003. But the problem is that that large political framing has taken both sides of the aisle, the left and the right here, where I work in Washington, hostage. And so long as America is hostage to this nightmare, it can never really wake up to actually deal with the root of the many fires of the Middle East, which is the government of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
All right, Emily, Behnam, thank you so much for your insights today.
Thank you.